Hello, and welcome to Brightburn Beating a Dead Horse. As always, I am your host, Sean McKinda.
And I'm your host, Brandy Bowers.
That sounds like a porn actress.
Oh, fuck this movie already.
Oh, yeah. We promised we were going to watch Brightburn, and oh my god, this might be this year's Hurricane Heist. As in, like, this might be this year's movie that we both absolutely hate that we watched for the podcast.
I gotta say, it feels kind of nice. I feel like it's been a long while since we've watched something this detestable, so I'm ready to get into it. I'm ready. I've got my fork and my knife. I'm ready to cut into this roast here.
So, I feel like the Hurricane Heist, I am not as frustrated with it as you are. I feel like you were way more frustrated with Hurricane Heist than I was. Much like Hurricane Heist, though, that is not to say I necessarily liked this movie in any way, shape, or form. It is an hour and a half. It's 91 minutes long, and it felt like the longest 91 minutes of my life. It is everything it says on the tin. It's just what if Superman, but a bad child. The gore is okay. If you want to go see that, I guess that's fine. If you really, really want to watch this movie, put it on while doing literally anything else, and you'll be okay, I think, in my book. It's not a good movie, but, like, it's okay background noise.
On the subject of gore, I just want to say this. If you, like me, have a particular thing about eyes in your gore movies, definitely stay the fuck away from this one. I had to watch that scene through my fucking, between the cracks of my fingers. Like, I was literally squinting. I couldn't look at it. So
there's a very gross eye scene.
So props to that, I guess. So Hurricane Heist, interesting point of comparison, because frustration is maybe even a more apropos word here than it is in Hurricane Heist, because I feel like that Hurricane Heist had exactly one job and it failed, which was make a schlocky action movie about a hurricane heist, and it was boring and shitty, and that's what was so infuriating about it. I would describe Hurricane Heist,
but it knew its identity.
It knew its identity. It had only one avenue, whereas this movie had several different avenues. Decided that it wanted to take all of them, tried to have its cake and eat it too, yet realized that these were completely incompatible ideas.
And also way more complex than a side little B plot.
Yes, exactly. So this is like a, what it says on this tin, like a straightforward horror movie about superheroes. Already, like, that's a pretty unique, interesting idea. You can make a fun horror movie out of that. It also takes itself pretty seriously, like tries to make these statements about superheroes, like that scene in the trailer with, like, I want to do good, Mom. Like it tries to do that bullshit. It tries to be kind of a serial killer movie about superheroes. Again, also kind of an interesting idea, but as you'll come to regret and know, I know a thing or two about serial killer psychology. And the fact that they fucked it up so bad while getting it almost right was incredibly frustrating to me to watch. It was a comment on parenting about, like, helicopter, like, millennial, like, coddling parenting, in a way. It had all these things, it had all these ideas, threw them in a fucking crock pot and set it to go for about a week, until the movie resulted in a disgusting sludge that I can't recommend anybody eat or watch.
So yeah, as I said, two very different opinions on this one, especially because I came at this, I think part of the big difference in opinion comes at how we watch this movie. If you're familiar with the podcast, you'll know that I'm kind of the resident superhero guy. I know I read a ton of comics. I have read a ton of comics. Jackson has usually a little bit more to say about superhero movies, but, like, when it comes to, like, how does this work in the comics, that's where I'm at.
Yeah.
So I definitely came at this saying, I'm curious to see how they do this understanding a Superman movie, but he's bad, which is not the most original idea in the world. But like, I can't think of anything, at least off the top of my head, where it's placed as Superman as an adolescent, which that in and of itself could be a very interesting movie of Superman coming into, puberty and wrestling with all sorts of additional changes and like learning how his powers work and his morality and everything like that. Like, that's a really clever, neat idea.
In fact, that's what Man of Steel should have been.
Yes, it should have been. And instead, Man of Steel feels like a more successful What If Superman but evil type of movie.
Zing!
So it's not really successful in any sort of superhero capacity either. Like, it just being what it says on the tin, you're not going to get anything out of it. And especially, like, this was my biggest complaint with this movie, getting ready to go see it, is we don't need a What If Superman but bad movie right now. I'm going to throw a link to one of my friends who wrote this whole article about Superman and, talked to Brian Michael Bendis, one of the writers of Superman and everything like that, and, like, this wonderful article talking all about, like, Superman and why we need Superman now more than ever, and because he's always been like a superhero of open ideologies and everything. And so, like, when here's Superman, but he's bad in this time of America where everything just feels like shit. That's not what Superman is. Superman's a beacon of hope. The S stands for hope. I don't want this right now. I want hope. I don't want shit.
Watch the 1970 Richard Donner Superman movie, everyone. It's real good. I will say, I will slightly disagree with your take there, and we'll go into this. In that I think that What If Superman But Bad could be precisely the kind of movie or commentary that needs to happen in this dark, cynical world. But in order to do that, you would need a very deft touch, which this movie does not have, and it attempts to do it anyway. And that's one of the reasons it's so fucking infuriating. And also, I just want to say, what if Superman as an adolescent, like, coming to terms with things? That's the other reason that I was maybe sort of invested in this one, is that my novel is kind of that. It's about a girl with superpowers who lives like a sad sack Midwest life and is like grappling with like coming of age and like morality and shit. It's basically exactly what you described. I think it's a pretty good story, if I do say so myself.
So it can be done.
And it can also be done well. I mean, that's kind of what Mob Psycho 100 is. That's a great show.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And so like Mob Psycho 100, I mentioned that like that was a show that had me like fucking sweating like while I was watching it. Like, oh god, like it's tackling so many similar themes that I did, but it's doing them so well. How could I ever compare? This kind of movie gave me the opposite reaction where I was watching it, and I started sweating for a little bit when there was a prominent scene in an arcade, because there's actually a prominent scene in an arcade in my novel. So I was sweating a little bit there, but otherwise I was like, oh man, like I'm way better at this than these hacks. Like, holy shit. Hopefully it'll be out soon so y'all can retroactively judge that statement. But I'm pretty confident in my work, at least more confident in it than fucking Brightburn. And so I think that's another reason. These are kind of themes and ideas I've been thinking about and playing around with a lot, like, a couple of years ago, like when I first wrote the first draft, and put a lot of care and thought into to try and make sure I got it right. The fact that this movie gets it so wrong, I got personal stakes in this one. I got an axe to grind.
So here's an interesting question that I was just kind of thinking about as you were talking. We pretty much established that it doesn't really work as a superhero movie. It gets a lot of things right from like the cultural sense that you're going to touch on in a little bit here. We haven't mentioned this, but I know you and I have talked about this in our pre-discussion, that it's basically a perfectly functional movie. The script is kind of a nightmare in a lot of ways, but like the movie itself works. Like there's not any big glaring holes with it.
Yes.
Do you think it works as a horror movie?
I've been thinking about this, and arguably yes. I would say there is enough like memorable gore, like the imagery of like a Superman like Man of Stealing his way around is like a horror movie is an interesting idea, mostly executed. However, I think that my argument would be that if its only interest was like kind of this like low level like schlocky approach of like we don't want to do anything but scare people, but try to do that through the lens of a superhero movie, I think they introduce too many ideas and themes in such a like careless way that I don't think I couldn't really enjoy it on that level, just because like it kept asking me to think about things and then I thought about them and wasn't satisfied. But I can see the argument being made that if you're not so hung up on the themes and shit, you may be able to just enjoy this as like a straightforward like kind of slasher movie about like a creepy kid.
If you're not so hung up on like the movie.
I mean, that's true. I mean, I basically just gave the Jurassic World argument right there. But so that is to say, I think I can see someone enjoying this because the premise is unique enough and mostly executed on well. But I think if you want even like a sliver of writing quality, because with horror movies, like a lot of people don't give a shit about the writing in a horror movie. So
yeah, they go to get jump scared and like watch people get killed in interesting ways.
Yeah, and if that's all you want, then this might do you fine. I'm not
That's
a big
why
horror
we
movie.
don't talk about them. Yeah, I was gonna say
Yeah.
we talk about like the big ones from Ari Aster, and there's got to be another horror movie we've talked. Well, I mean, Alien.
Yeah,
is essentially-
Alien. Yeah. I kind of wish I had brought Haley with me to this one because she watches a lot of horror movies. But
I kind of bummed that you didn't, because she is like our one horror perspective we know.
Yeah, I mean, for what it's worth, I had the wrong idea kind of what I thought the movie. I didn't realize it was going to be like lean so hard into the horror movie angle, so I made it sound more like a supervillain story, which she wasn't interested in. And to quote her, she doesn't like superhero movies because they're too big old white dudes slapping each other around and then someone gets fridged.
That's superheroes.
There you go, Haley. I promise I'd include that. Yeah. So I probably could have talked her into seeing this if I realized it was going to lean so hard into the horror movie angle, and now regret that I didn't.
Yeah, that would have been very interesting to know, just because, as we've said, we don't know that much about horror movies. We did Pet Sematary. I forgot. Duh.
Yeah.
We don't do that many horror movies on the podcast, just because a lot of horror movies that come out just aren't really our shtick. They just don't interest us. There's nothing against people who want to just go get scared for a little while, but sorry, it's not what we're here for.
I want me some themes. Everything's gotta have themes in my world. Everyone's like, I want it to be just action or scares or mindless entertainment. No, give me them themes, brother.
You want to talk about those themes?
Let's talk about those fucking themes. Let's talk spoilers. Although, who gives a shit about spoilers? Don't watch this fucking movie.
Well, before we do talk spoilers, next week I have no idea what's going to happen because our friend here is busy. So I don't really know what I'm planning on doing next week. It might just be me talking about something I watched for like an hour by myself.
I'm sorry to leave you high and dry like this, Sean, but yeah, I'm gonna have next week I'm hosting company for an extended period of time, so I will not be available, unfortunately.
So I don't know what's gonna happen. Maybe I'll rustle up a guest really quick. Maybe I'll just talk to myself for a little while. We'll see, but we'll get some sort of episode out to you, even if it's just like a 15-minute goofy thing. So stay tuned for that, I guess. So let's just talk about superheroes for a little bit, and just kind of what this movie kind of tried to do but did nothing with it. Because as I said, there's a really interesting idea for a, like teenage Superman and seeing what he does with his powers. And yes, that is just Smallville, but I want like younger than Smallville Superman. So Jackson did say that the movie does kind of touch on that a little bit. But the whole gimmick of this movie is that Brendan, Breyer, whatever his name is basically, he comes to Earth in the exact same way, but this time the pod that sends him telepathically brainwashes him like he was a good kid, and then he's just not. And that's boring as shit.
So he, even though the trailers and the movie itself play up the fact that he's Superman so much, he's actually Goku. Pre-brain injury Goku. He's been sent to kill us all.
Basically, yeah. Like, that's why he's here. It's what he's doing. Which, once again, if you're just going for a horror movie, fine. But, like, when you rely so heavily on Superman imagery, my brain has to go to, well, how do I compare it to Superman imagery? And Sam, the significant other, is way more invested into Superman than I am. And she raised the really interesting point of, it's not like Superman came to Earth with this innate goodness in him. Like, that would make Superman very boring. He was raised to be such.
I actually want to make a side note, sorry, and that I recommended the Christopher Reeve Superman earlier, and I still do, but that was actually my big problem with that movie, was that it basically did that. It had Jor-El, like, download Superman into his brain, basically, and it fucking sucks.
Oh, wow, that's weird, yeah. So, like, but that's how Superman works, usually, is, he's raised well, and his family, cares and loves for him and teaches him how to be, a moral, upstanding person who wants to save the world. Oh my God. Remind me to talk about the bees and the wasps. That part pissed me off. To take that, there's an interesting idea there where you create a horror movie where you don't brainwash the kid and you just have him like raised in the same situation, but like puberty hits him in a different way and he goes off the rails in the way that this movie does. Like that's an interesting concept for a super villain, like Superman-esque individual. The brainwash thing is just boring. Like, this isn't interesting. Like, it almost does set up where he starts to question himself and starts to wonder what he's doing here, and like, if he's an alien, why am I here, and that sense of superiority. But then it just still reverts back to, brainwash, fam, them, the world, or whatever the hell the thing says. It's dumb. It's a really uninteresting Superman parallel, and it's just a shorthand. Like, you could easily make it more interesting and just extend the runtime by 5 minutes and just have him, slowly lose control in those 5 minutes, wrestling with various emotions. It's uninteresting and really kind of lame in every way, shape, and form.
Brainwashing might be my single least favorite plot device in fiction. It's only useful insofar as you want to have a fight scene between two good guys who would otherwise never fight each other. Other than that, it has no, like, thematic...
Or, like, a Borg type of thing.
Yeah. I would call that assimilation. I wouldn't even put that into, like, the same, like, category.
I mean, it depends on how you want to read it, though. Like, brainwashing into the hive mind type of thing going on there. Or, like, Clockwork Orange is another good example of good brainwashing.
Yeah, like conditioning. I suppose there are ways to do it well, but like generally speaking, because the thing about brainwashing is that it removes all character agency. It removes any sort of like explanation or like moral question of how they came to be or why they believe the things that they do, and just explains it with, well, because he's programmed like a robot.
It makes Brightburn the ultimate evil because he is the ultimate evil, whereas Superman is the ultimate good because he chooses to be the ultimate good and constantly wrestles with the fact that he could go the other way at any given time given the right circumstances. Like, I think in Infinite Crisis, I want to say, is the one that I'm thinking of, where Superman actually like is so concerned about this because, oh my god, I know in the in Injustice, he actually goes bad, but in Infinite Crisis, I want to say, oh my god. All right, I'm gonna sound like an idiot now because I am totally blanking on what I was trying to get at with Infinite Crisis. I just know that like in Infinite Crisis, there's a lot of him being concerned, seeing what is happening, and realizing that he could go that way himself. Is basically what I was getting at. There's like Infinite Crisis, Crisis on Infinite Earths, and Final Crisis, and I don't remember which one's which right now. I think it might actually be Final Crisis. That's Sean's comic book minute of him forgetting what comic books are for a second.
So here's a story that I actually want to read that I haven't read, so I can't like confirm whether or not it like plays with this super well, but it's pretty critically acclaimed. It's pretty it's been recommended to me. So Superman Red Sun is a what if story about yes, what if his pod landed in the Soviet Union? And that, like, we know that, like, you know, Superman's, like, good old-fashioned, like, baseball and mom's apple pie, you know, Midwest background, and his good parents making him such a good person. Like, that's something that we all intrinsically understand about Superman, so much to the point that the prospect of him landing in, like, Selenoyarsk, Russia, or whatever, is inherently interesting because of this.
Yeah, no, like that's how you do a Superman story, but he's not just brainwashed. Like there's things you can do with Superman for sure. And the thing about all this too is I'm not even the biggest Superman fan. I don't particularly care about Superman, but if you're gonna do something like this, I want to see it done well. And like there's a lot of almost interesting Superman tropes and ideas in this movie that just kind of fizzle into absolutely nothing. Basically, as soon as he gets brainwashed, just to fucking throw everything out the window.
No, literally, as soon as like he started going all like Manchurian Candidate on us, I was like, oh, this movie's gonna fucking suck. Brainwashing is the worst.
Yeah. No, the part where I lost it actually was when they started talking about the bees and the wasps, because I immediately understood exactly what was going on. And I'm like, this fucking blows. Because at one point, he makes they're watching a video about wasps, and they're like, well, can anybody tell me the difference between bees and wasps? And the kid's like, well, bees are pollinators, and they're good for the environment and the world, and wasps are predators, and they just kill things. And sometimes there's certain wasps. Like, that was the end of the question. And then he goes on to say there are wasps that can't produce their own young, a plot line that goes nowhere, but come to other nests and force them to raise their young. And I'm like, okay, that's it. That's how it all works. You explain the movie, great. I get what you're doing here. This fucking sucks. So Superman's a pollinator because he's a bee. He does the good for the world. You're a wasp because you just sting people like an asshole. Fucking great. I'm so happy. You have summarized your entire movie for me in the first 5 minutes, and I can check out now. I am done.
Please include your like Brightburn in 12 seconds cut in the show notes.
Yeah, I did whip up a quick little YouTube thing when I got home, mostly because I made the connection between Elizabeth Banks and Scrubs and realized that there's a very simple way to summarize this show or this movie.
Yeah, no, the bees and the wasps thing, pretty terrible for a lot of reasons, like, you know, the one that you just stated, as well as like the fact that that's the jumping off point. Like, all the kids start like snickering in class, like, look at this nerd, he knows science, we're bullies, we're gonna bully him. And like, that's always fucking tiresome, especially because like did these people ever go to high school, or do they only remember it like through movie tropes? Because if people make fun of
they went to high school, they definitely were not the kids getting bullied.
100% not. Especially because, like, yes, people will make fun of the know-it-all in class, but, like, they'll do it later and, like, roll their eyes and, like, check out because they're already checked out anyway. Like, they're not going to make a riot in class unless, like, that doesn't happen unless a kid does something, like, particularly egregious, you know?
Oh, yeah. No. Like, you don't fucking call him a maggot unless... That's not what you do in class. You don't do it in class. I speak from experience of getting bullied. All right, so let's slide into other dumb things about this movie. And let's start with the fucking best part of the entire goddamn movie, which is basically the entirety of the CGI budget.
Yes.
And I'm going to save, we'll talk about the best CGI moment, but I do want to talk about watching him fly for a hot second, because it did look like that Christopher Reeves movie from way back when.
Oh god, it totally did. Well, it's funny because he did both the Christopher Reeves thing and the Henry Cavill thing. Like, half the scene he was just sitting there like floating on a wire, and the other half he's fucking yeeting houses and shit. So
it's wild. And like when he's floating on a wire, it doesn't look that bad. But like the end when he flies his mom up and drops her, like that just looks straight out of like Superman 2 or whatever the hell that one was.
That was a real eye roller, because that's so clearly like a callback to the like famous scene from the Christopher Reeve movie where like he flies with Lois Lane above the clouds and like holds her by his fingertips and stuff. Except here it's basically like a Ready Player One, like remember Superman, remember Lois Lane, remember the flying above the like yeah, no, I mean that's exactly what it was, because there was no real meaning to it. And then he drops his mom.
But like that scene itself is clearly like him standing on a green screen box with a green screen behind them.
Yes.
And it looks awful.
I mean, the Christopher Reeve version of that particular scene looks better, because at least it's dynamic. At least they're doing stuff.
It's not just a JPEG.
Yeah. All right. So, like, next bounty. Someone get that scene for me, but put the Shooting Stars music from that meme a while back over it.
But yeah, the best part, the part that got me the heartiest chuckle this entire fucking movie, is when he's trying to start a lawnmower and just fucking chucks it across like a football field of distance, and it like pops in the back, and it looks just the worst. It looks so bad, but it is the funniest fucking thing to watch.
My favorite thing about this scene is what he does afterwards, because he like, he's like, oh shit, I just, fucking threw a lawnmower into space. Like, oh no. And he goes and he finds it. And, it's running. He finally got it working. I don't know how it fucking survived the landing, but whatever. We need to have our dumbass scene. So he goes over and he watches the blade spinning, and he like holds out his hand like towards it. And you know what he's going to do. And the whole time you're like, what kind of, caveman are you? Like, this is how you're going to test your power? You're going to shove your hand in the lawnmower? Like, without any proof that you have, like, durability or whatever? Like, what the fuck, dude?
So, as much as I knocked it here, I do have to say, I think most of their budget went to practical effects. And their practical stuff looks pretty decent.
Does, yeah, sure does.
Like, the practical gore looks really good. When he's hefting the truck up, it looks really good. Like, there's a lot of practical stuff that looks really, really good. Which, we always complain about the fact that there's not enough practical, and now there is, and we're complaining that the CGI looks bad, so I guess we're just never happy. But, fuck, props to you guys. The practical looked really good.
I will say this. I think, generally speaking, the movie looked pretty good. Like, the lawnmower scene was funny, and the fucking green screen at the end was stupid as hell. And part of that's how that scene was staged too. Like, it was just so static and lazy.
Oh yeah, it was. They were in the middle of the fucking screen doing nothing.
Yeah, but overall the movie looks good, which is probably the nicest thing I can say about it.
They clearly didn't use the CGI that much for a reason. Like, I think they knew that it wasn't looking the best. Because, like, especially, oh my god, when they're in the woods after the kid, like, the dad tries to shoot him in the back of the head, and the kid's just, like, flying around, it looks terrible. He looks so out of place.
You know what else looks bad, but could have been good in the right tone? Him blasting his dad's brain out with the heat vision.
Oh my god, I cackled.
Like that could have been, like, that looked bad, but kind of in an awesome way, but that was not the tone of the scene. Like, the movie's so cloying about, like, oh, we used to be such a good kid. We're going to open on home video of, like, you know, a little baby running around, and oh, he's our sweet, precious gift from God, or whatever. And, you know, the dad is, you know, tearing up as he's ready to put him down like Old Yeller, and then he just gets fucking blasted, literally blown the fuck out.
Oh yeah, that scene was fucking great. It is another of those things where, like, the gore, it was almost there, but just the contrast from everything else that has happened in this movie makes it fucking hilarious. Let's talk about the final silly moment, shall we? The fucking essay.
Oh god, this one didn't make me cackle. This made me so fucking mad. I was so angry at the movie.
Yeah, this one I rolled my eyes hard because after we have established that he's like weirdly creeping on this girl, and oh my god, this movie is terrible to its women. Just awful. But after we've established he's creeping on this girl, he eventually shows up at her house at one point, and she's working on an essay that's entitled "The Downfall of Truth and Justice in the Modern Era." And I'm just like, fuck it, I'm out. This is it. We're done.
Between this and, like, that terrible fucking line in the trailer of, like, I want to do good, Mom, so disingenuous, so, like, not fucking earned at all. Like, that's the essay is corny as hell, regardless, but at least, like, if the movie had actually been about that and, like, meaningfully commentated on Superman in any way, like, I would have let it slide as, like, a little wink to the audience. But as it just is completely fucking infuriating. How dare they?
No context with the rest of the movie other than to be like, yeah, we know we're working on something with Superman. But it's not Superman. It's your bad Superman.
It's Brandy Bowers.
It's bad. It's dumb and bad. So you want to take us home with some dark shit?
Okay. I just want to say that my personal favorite dumb moment while we're at it is when speaking of the Pet Sematary episode, you'll recall that I wanted somebody red misted in that movie if you listen to it.
Yeah.
And oh my god, when he yeets the fucking sheriff and literally red mists him, I fucking, like, howled. It was amazing. It was exactly what I wanted. And honestly, that's a pretty good segue into where I'm going with this, because I'm going to propose two different hypothetical movies that are not Brightburn, that would have been better than Brightburn, and let's do it. So route number one that you can do with this, because like I said, you know, Superman but bad, or like you said, Superman but bad is not, you know, uncultivated ground. It is not a new idea. However, what is kind of a unique, interesting new idea is the idea of the superhero horror movie. So, as we were saying, like, you could play this as just like a straightforward slasher movie about a creepy kid who has superpowers, and you use kind of the tropes and the imagery to, like, make something kind of goofy. But also, like, gory, intense, and, like, you know, like filling that same sort of niche that, like, Friday the 13th does, like kind of straightforward slasher movie, which is what the movie tries to be sometimes. But those moments are wildly out of place with all of the attempts at moralizing and serious drama. And God, with that, like, I just don't know where to begin. I think what's most frustrating to me about the movie is how close it is to getting it right, but fucks it up at its core with the brainwashing shit. So, generally speaking, let's talk about the real world. Let's talk about the unpleasant business of real life massacres, real life murderers, the problem of evil, let's say. Let's talk about what real evil people are like and why they are this way. Or no, not even why they are this way. This isn't like, we're not going to make any, like, normative claims here. We're just going to try and describe, like, usually how it goes. And if you make this kind of movie, because with this sort of plot line, typically how it goes. Like, probably the closest comparison I can think is Chronicle. Came out a couple of years ago. Okay movie. Has some nice effects, but its plotline is very standard in that you have a kid who's kind of bullied, like kind of an outcast, kind of a nerd or a freak or whatever, and he gets powers, and then he uses them to sort of take vengeance upon like the people that bullied him because he sees himself as superior. And that's a pretty common narrative, like going back at least as far as Carrie, probably even further. But the thing about that narrative is that like it's kind of a harmful one, because that's where we get the meme of like the reason that school shootings and massacres and terrorism happens is because of like mental health issues or, people being bullied. Like that was the I'm going to refer to Columbine a lot, because I think if you're going to write something that tackles this kind of material, you should know what that was actually about. But that was the like dominant narrative, like hot off the Columbine massacre, is, these two kids were misunderstood. They were bullied. They were part of this like social outcast group. Like people should have listened to them, and maybe we could have prevented this, which, it like logically, that's the sort of narrative that like makes sense in our minds. Like that's one way to sort of like think about it. But generally speaking, from what I've like researched and studied, that's not really how it goes. How it really goes is that you have one or two types of these sort of peoples.
So at this moment, Jackson's power went out. We did manage to save our recording and begin a new one. However, it's going to be on a slightly different microphone, so apologies for the audio hiccup.
So, broadly speaking, there are two types of these mass shooters, of these serial killers, of these terrorists, for lack of a better word. And the Columbine massacre is a great example. I think that if you're at all like interested in solving the problems of like mass shootings, mass terror, or even just writing a story about it, I think you absolutely need to understand what was going on there, because it's kind of ground zero for all this shit. So, broadly speaking, you have two types of people. One type who I will call the mastermind, the other type who I will call the flunky. Now, either of these types can exist independently. A flunky does not necessarily need a mastermind, but nor does a mastermind necessarily need a flunky. This is more about like the thought process, because it's very different from that sort of tropey outline that I gave in terms of stories like Chronicle, of like someone who is bullied like retaliating. It's usually not that simple. So usually, and I'll start with the flunky, who was Klebold in this case of the Columbine massacre. It's someone who is closer to the typical psychology that we would expect out of a like terrorist mass shooter, what have you. Often, riddled with mental health issues, often maybe abused, like maybe like has a lot of things going on. But I think the key thing that marks the flunky in this scenario is instability. It's like prone to emotional outbursts, prone to like lashing out, more likely to like be the person who like kind of snaps and does something on a whim, and less likely to have typed up an entire manifesto. So that's type 1. Type 2, on the other hand, and the type that this movie seems to be more directly engaging with, is the mastermind. And in the case of Columbine, this was Harris, who's again, like, had a manifesto, who had a series of journals and blog posts that outlined exactly what he wanted, which was, basically fame and power, to be like the biggest, like most terrifying person in history, to outdo like the Oklahoma City bombings, and all that good stuff. And the thing that marks these people,
good,
right? So he won. So the thing about these kinds of people, though, is that they are not unstable or even necessarily mentally ill like the flunky. Often they know exactly what they're doing, like have a very coherent, consistent ideology, and are just marked by a complete lack of empathy for other people and a strong feeling of like superiority and almost like a god complex. These people, and this is where it crosses over into serial killers, because serial killers have a very similar sort of mentality, even if the like evil acts being done are slightly different in practice. So these kind of people will often be very intelligent. They will often be very charismatic. Not at all like an outcast or a loner, like bullied or, tossed aside by society. And they will use these things to manipulate people. They're manipulators at heart. And particularly, like, I think that this manipulation aspect is something that's really missing from the movie, because it so clearly wants to build them up in the mastermind sort of mindset, right? And in case, like, I guess, like, to make my argument a little clearer, like, I'm not just talking about like this one massacre. I think you can, broadly speaking, like, see this archetype in all sorts of different like horrific acts throughout history, or even like if you want to upgrade it to like a national scale, if you think about something like ISIS, you have like sort of the foot soldiers who are going out and like committing the acts of terrorism and like doing things like suicide bombings because of the political situation in the Middle East, them feeling like they have nowhere else to go, and getting a promise of like religious rewards like fits in with sort of their like unstable sort of lot in life. And then you have the manipulators, and then you have the people like who may or may not believe in the same sort of dogma that the flunkies do, but certainly are a lot more intelligent and have a lot more of a capacity to sort of plan. The leaders of this, because any terrorist organization like this will have its leaders, even if they are deposed of and unstable and stuff like that. So I would make the case that you can see this type of behavior, this sort of dichotomy, in a lot of different places. So Brightburn very obviously wants to have the mastermind sort of like quality, but
this does go back into like the idea of the bees that we were talking about earlier, where they were talking really about like the superiority of the bees. So this isn't just out of nowhere. Like there is a lot of basis for this within the film.
A very telling line of dialogue, and one that would be appropriate in a better, more well thought out, well constructed movie, is when he's talking to the the school counselor. And he's like, well, I learned that, I wasn't who I thought I was. I learned that I am something better. I am superior. I am better than everyone else. And that obviously very much goes, like, if the bees, as obvious as they were, the birds and the bees weren't enough of a metaphor for you, like, it bludgeons you over the head with this, like, I am a higher being bullshit. So the problem... What's the problem? A, the brainwashing, which again removes any sort of character agency to create an interesting sort of villain, and make any sort of reasonable commentary on like why people do horrible things, or even critique like tendencies we might find similar in ourselves. Like that's the scariest monster in a horror movie. Those are the ones that tend to be known as classics. So there's that, but also, in addition to the brainwashing, the movie wants to have its cake and eat it too, with sort of the flunky mindset of, in addition to just playing up the very tropey, gamers rise up narrative that is implied at the beginning by all the bullying from the bee scenes, and that scene where he's like getting pushed around and like the girl rejecting his advances. And I mean that shit with the girl, that's kind of where I want to end this, because that was the most disgusting part of the movie. Definitely.
Yeah.
So, but like between that and like the line of dialogue with like, I want to be good, mom, which I guess could be a case of him trying to be manipulative, but like he seems pretty sincere and shocked at like her like trying to stab him. So like it's unclear. And just in general, they try to play him up like a flunky, and you can make either one work. I think either one could be a compelling story in this scenario. Like, you have the flunky mindset of maybe a kid who has these superpowers and genuinely like wants to do the right thing, but because of the process of like adolescence, like makes him prone to like angry outbursts, and because he has superpowers, this leads to disastrous consequences. Like that's a road you can take. However, that's more of a drama story, right? That's less of a horror movie, because to be a horror movie, you need your villain to have more of that manipulator characteristic. And this is so obviously like they so obviously want to make us think of serial killers by the fact that he has a signature at every one of his crimes, his stupid fucking superhero symbol, the fact that he has a costume, an alternate identity, which is incredibly stupid and only exists because we as an audience know what superheroes are. He has no pretensions, really, about being a hero. Like, that would be a coherent, like, narrative, and that, like,
there's not even any mention of superhero anywhere else in this movie. That's important to note too. Aside from the understanding of the audience that this is a riff on Superman, there's no other indication that this is anything to do with superheroes. So the fact that he's in a costume makes no sense.
No, and like it'd be one thing if like he as a character, like because he sees himself as this superior being, like feels he has the like moral authority or the high ground to like do what he pleases. Like that would be a character, but this is nothing. He just wears a hood because Superman and has a cape because Superman, and it fucking sucks. So where am I going with this? Like, why is this a big deal? Like, yeah, okay, so like the movie doesn't fully commit to any one characterization. It's just a shitty horror movie. Like, Jason doesn't have a very, I mean, I would argue fucking Jason has a more coherent, like, motivation than this kid does, but like, yeah, so, like, what's the big deal? And so the big deal, I think, is that scene with the girl, because that could have been a very, like, genuinely uncomfortable, genuinely, like, poignant moment of social commentary, but it played as it is in this movie feels so unearned, so out of place, and given, like, how the movie treats the mom as like an overly, like that's one of the other problems that like I don't want to waste too much time on since we're already running pretty long, is that the dynamic with the parents, I like the actors and I like their little relationship. I think they're cute, and that could have genuinely been in a better movie, like some like compelling drama over like them just trying to decide what to do about the kid, but it's presented so much as like, oh, father knows best, like he sees what he is before the mom and her womanly notions of, being attached to her son and shit. I gotta take him out and old yeller him like a good old man. It's fucking bullshit. It sucks.
It's really bad to their women characters. I've said this already, but like it's bad for a lot of reasons too. As a quick aside with that too, the women in this movie got so much worse than the men.
They get got real bad. Oh god. The yeah, I mean that scene with the cops is like pretty telltale. Like the sheriff just gets yeeted instantly, and the lady cop gets this fucking long drawn out sequence of her getting beaten, and then like a close up on her bloody face.
It's
yeah, I didn't even think about how much worse they got, but you're absolutely right.
Because like the men are just like really quick. The longest one is Noah's death, but even Noah's death is more like they hide the fact that his jaw is all bloody behind his hand. So like you get that quick shot, but then it's gone. Meanwhile, you like have to watch the woman pull the glass out of her eye, and then there's her death is prolonged, and you see her crucified with her innards out, and then every woman in this movie gets treated like shit.
So this comes to a head in the scene, I think in the most like creepy, like realistic sort of way, is the subplot when that begins with the dad trying to have the talk with the son. They find some like Victoria's Secret models in his bedroom and are like, haha, like, oh kids, masturbating. And then they find along with that some like creepy like anatomy shit of like innards and blood and guts and shit. And they're like, oh fuck. All right, time for you to have the talk, Dad. And so that's the setup. And the dad's talk is one of the stupidest, most poorly written like fucking like awkward sex talks I've ever seen in fiction, that is phrased in such a weird rapey way that only exists to like give the kid the motivation to be a creep.
Do you think that it was written to be rapey, or that the rapiness is incidental? Like that's an interesting question, actually.
I mean, it's for I would say that it had to have been intentional, because it's so clearly a ham-fisted setup for the next part of the plot. I mean, maybe because like in universe, like it's obvious that like the dad spends a weird amount of time talking about masturbation.
It's supposed to be a joke, and it's just uncomfortable.
Yeah, and so like he's clearly like in universe when he says the phrasing that makes it rapey is give into your urges or something like that. And like in the context of the movie, the dad's talking about yanking it, but obviously the kid interprets that as like oh, women are
quote unquote yours.
Yes. And so now, as far as like commentary of mindsets, if Brandon was like a coherent character who had like a coherent psychology, that maybe even earlier in the movie, like again, if we're going full into the manipulator aspect of things, you make him charismatic, you make him intelligent, you make him even liked by the student body, and for the first part of the movie, perhaps even get the audience to identify with him a little bit, to make it real uncomfortable when they see those sort of feelings taken to its logical conclusion, which is, in this case, the fact that he ends up like stalking her, like hiding in her windows, and like treating her like an object, and getting really really pissed and like crushing her hand when she kind of rejects his advances and is understandably scared of him.
Like the other thing, I think, just as a quick aside too, is like everything about this movie. I mentioned earlier on that even their B plots, are. They realize they're way too complex and they can't focus enough time on it. So every B plot doesn't really go anywhere. It just kind of sits there petering for a little bit and then dies out.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the things that made me, I think, like most mad about this B plot, and there's a lot, is just like how it doesn't make any sense at all from a character perspective, because. And this gets into the whole, well, is it brainwashing or is it not? Is it brainwashing or is it ideology? Is it brainwashing or is it the mom coddling him? Like, the movie just cannot fucking decide on, it changes at the drop of a hat. Because, like, when he first tries to, like, show up at her window and, like, show up in her room, like, he doesn't try to, like, court her or flirt with her. He scares the shit out of her by, like, going and playing the music and being super fast and being seen only in the window. Like, even if you are, like, a stupid like idiot who's like, oh, I'm gonna go take what's mine or whatever. How can you interpret that any other way to be like as flirting other than just fucking terrifying someone? If this is like a kid who like does something. Like, you can easily see a plot where this kid does something creepy, and then because he feels entitled, like, takes his anger out on this girl.
Or they could have set up that scene. Like, they could have established why he thought that would be romantic or whatever. Like, it's... I talk about this every fucking week. It's another case of no setup, all payoff.
Yeah, and because the way that they play it too, like I can easily see like he plays the song on the laptop, like he thinks it's romantic, as like, hey, I'm in your room and I'm super fast and I'm really cool, like please go out with me, and she's like, ew, no, like what the fuck, get out. And then like maybe she screams for mom and he leaves and he's pissed off about it. Like that'll do, but we need to have, since it's a horror movie, we need to have this stupid horror movie jump scare setup of him like playing the fucking song over and over again, even though it makes no sense for him to do so. And then you have that super uncomfortable scene where the teacher is making her like, hold his hand and like pick him up like after she like is traumatized and fucking freaks out and drops him. And this scene is genuinely uncomfortable, and this exact same scene in a smarter, better movie could have been like a profound statement, a profound like feeling of like illustrating like the sort of male entitlement mindset that leads to these sort of things. I mean, you see like if we're calling from our pool of murderers and serial killers and shit, Elliot Rodger, his whole manifesto was a big incel rant about how he wasn't getting sex and was owed it. These are real things that are happening. I mean, we even talked about this in the fucking Infinity War episode, for Christ's sake. And in this movie, it just, because it's so doesn't line up with like what's been set up or treated like real characters or real people in like a degrading, uncomfortable, horrible situation, it feels icky. It's super gross, because like without that context of like being a critique and like taking a hard look at like how like people genuinely develop these sort of behaviors, it comes off as like, hey, like, let's make the audience uncomfortable and let's make the girl uncomfortable because reasons. Wouldn't this be super freaky and gross, guys? And it fucking sucks.
Like, the whole problem with this movie, the things that Jackson has intonated and the things that I have intonated in my own way, is that they tried to make a number of movies out of this. And an interesting Superman movie, an interesting, like, drama using superheroes as a point of reference for, male entitlement in a lot of ways. All sorts of interesting ideas for a movie reside within this movie, but then they put it in the horror genre and the whole thing just sucks for it. Like, it's one of those things too where this is a good idea for a horror movie, but you can't include this many, at least, plot points within it. Like, one or two, sure, you can make something interesting out of it, but trying to make this many drama and, what if Superman but bad plots all together just makes it a mess and uncomfortable and not good in every way, shape, and form. Other than how it was made.
Other than the very surface level stuff. I fucking hate this movie. Throw it in the bin.
Yeah, it was a rough one. I was hoping that it would at least be like, I don't know. It's so overwhelmingly average in a lot of regards that it's just it's so fucking boring.
And the ways that it's not average make me mad. I'm steamed, brother. I'm popping off.
Oh man, it's almost like an AVP Requiem rant.
It kind of is. It's very similar in that regard. Except the Requiem. I mean, it is kind of like the Requiem in that it's kind of gross for grossness' sake. But I think what's more galling to me about this and why I'm so mad about this and not about AVP is that, like, AVP was like shitty, like, base gross schlock. This was shitty base gross schlock that tried to pretend like it had smart ideas or something to say about superheroes, about society, and it's just as fucking brainless. Fuck.
Yeah, that's fair. The ending of Requiem where it got really bad to women was the part that pissed me off, I think.
Yeah.
Apparently that's just what sets us off, is when a movie gets really shitty to women without having any sort of point to it, which, I mean, is probably a good thing to set us off. Like, in the grand scheme of things, we're not yelling about continuity, so...
Oh, but I totally forgot. His pants were blue in that one scene, and they were navy in the next. Yeah!
I will say there were a couple shots, actually, that were just kind of, like, strangely structured, and, like, it felt like it was kind of breaking some basic filmmaking rules. I'm going to talk about this really quick. We were wrapping up here, but fuck it. I want to get nitpicky for a hot second here. Or, like, the line of sight just didn't quite line up in a couple places.
Oh, yeah, I know what you mean. I can't think of any specific scenes, but I remember feeling like, this is weird, and I don't know why.
Yeah, like, that's really what it was, because I was watching it, and, like, the line of sight just wasn't quite there. Like, it felt like it was kind of missing, and they were looking somewhere in the middle ground as opposed to at each other. I think there was only one or two scenes like that, but it was definitely something I'm like, this just... It's wrong, and I think that was what was wrong with it. I've been Sean McKinda. I don't know. Find me on Twitter at Sean_McKinda. Find me on Twitch at twitch.tv/helpless_Skippy. Find me at my website, iSorb.com, and find me writing at 25yearslatersite.com.
And I've been Jackson Keller. You can find me over at twitch.tv/JacksonJKeller. And co-hosting on Sean's channel and my friend's Connor's channel at twitch.tv/Genghis_Con_. I won't be streaming pretty much for like 2 weeks, though, because I'll be at a convention and then I'll be hosting company, and I'm going to go out and live my best life. So come back in a while.
If you want to get in contact with the podcast in any other way, you can do so by reaching out to us at BADHcast on Twitter, or you can join our Patreon exclusive Discord. It's available to everyone on our Patreon, but our Colton Stallions also get access to our bonus episodes, including one coming out in about a week from when this goes live, where we'll be talking about Steel Magnolias.
Those bonus episodes have been pretty fucking great. Some real solid conversations, and you're missing out if you're not a patron right now. And the other thing that you get if you're a patron is a personalized shout out at the end of every episode. So shout out to our stallions, to Julia, to Travis, to my dear mother Autumn, and my dear Aunt Summer. Thank you so much for supporting the show, guys.
And thank you to everyone else who supports us on Patreon. Y'all are great. And also, thanks to Loads of Heavy with the use of our theme song. It is Suicide, ultimate take off the album High Octane, Low Expectations. They're a great band. They're on Spotify, all those other places. Go check them out. Give them your supports. And also, thanks to 25 Years Later Site.com for the endorsements and everything like that. You guys are great. There's a bunch of really talented writers out there. Go give them a listen. Or go give them your clicks. Go read their articles. Go see what they have to say about all sorts of modern TV shows, old movies, new movies, and everything in between. They're a bunch of great, really talented people. Next week, as I said, is gonna be something. I don't know. I'm gonna put something up for y'all, but
I love mysteries.
Bye.
Don't you go into the ground. Don't you go